Okay, we'll get started. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Federal Youth Network's Career Showcase on Communications. My name is Caitlin, and I'm going to be your moderator today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining from Vancouver, BC, on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, whose people have lived on the land since time immemorial. I encourage all of you to take a moment to acknowledge the land that you're joining us from as well. So we're going to start by just doing a quick poll of 3 questions just to get to know everyone that's online. And so the questions that are going to come up are, what field profession do you currently work in? If you could switch to any job within the government of Canada for a day, what would it be? And what motivates you most in your career? Okay, so we've got a tie right here. Policy, HR, and comms are all at 13%. Interesting. The intelligence analyst and the comms officer are high up on the if you could switch jobs. And learning and growth opportunities are what motivate people most in their career. And that's great for communications because it's always evolving. Great. Okay, thanks everyone for participating in that. Okay, I think we're ready to go with sharing the slides, unless they're already up on the screen and I just can't see them. Perfect. Okay, we'll just take 1 second for the slides. Okay, so as I said, my name is Caitlin, and I'll be your moderator today. I've worked in communications for the federal government for about 10 years, mostly in a regional setting. I started my career as a co-op student for the Department of National Defense. I've also done a secondment with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and worked for the Western Communications team at the Canada Border Services Agency. I'm currently a communications advisor for Justice Canada's Media Relations Monitoring and Issues Management team, and I've been there for just about a year. I've been very, very lucky in my experience in communications to have done a lot of different roles, from on-call media interviews for search and rescue cases and supporting international Navy ship deployments, to supporting ministerial announcements and writing lots of comms products like news releases, speeches, and social media content. And although I'm currently coming from Vancouver, I've spent a large portion of my career in Victoria on Vancouver Island. And I'm very excited to be part of this session today and to hear from the great panel of communicators that we have lined up. So let's get into the session. So first, we're going to do a quick overview. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items, and then we'll introduce your panelists and discuss what communications professionals do, explore career paths, qualifications and competencies, and development and training opportunities. And then we'll jump into the Q&A portion where you can ask your questions. So you may have noticed that all attendee microphones and cameras are deactivated. As we move through the session today, we just ask that you share your questions by using the Q&A button. You can also vote for your questions, the questions that you like, by using the thumbs up button. And this will just help us know which ones to ask first when we get to that point. Um, this session is in English only, but there is a French session offered just after this at 2:30 Eastern Time, so please feel free to join that one if preferred. And all sessions are recorded and will be available on the Federal Youth Network's YouTube channel. Previous showcases are already there, so feel free to check those out if they interest you. And you can always revisit this if you miss something or share it with a friend if you enjoy it. Our learning objectives for today are to help you learn about different career paths in communications, understand typical responsibilities, required skills, and day-to-day realities of a role in communications, to gain some practical insights and personal perspectives on career development and progression, and to connect you with networking and mentorship opportunities to learn more about a career in communications. Okay, so today we have hopefully four, possibly three exceptional communicators joining us to share their knowledge and experience. I have Caro Camus, who's a senior communications advisor at the G7 Summits Management Office, Aditi Kassoon, a communications advisor at the Privy Council Office, and hopefully, if the technical difficulties were sorted out, Ananya Ramesh, a multimedia officer at Finance Canada, and Lucy Ellis, a senior speechwriter at the Privy Council Office. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Caro to share a little bit about her experience and what communications professionals do.
Hi, so as mentioned, my name is Caro Camo. So currently I am a senior communications advisor with the G7 Office for Summits Management. I did, however, start my career working in the federal government as a reservist with the Canadian Armed Forces, and then in 2018 made the transfer into the public service itself. I was at the Department of National Defense for a few years, and then following that, I transferred over to Global Affairs Canada. And then at this time, I'm on assignment. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what the day-to-day can look like when you work in communications. As you can imagine, our days can be very varied. Whether or not you're working in internal comms or in events management or so on and so forth, our days can look so vastly different, which I think is one of the benefits of working in communications. You have a lot of opportunity to kind of look and see elsewhere, try out new things. So if we could just switch the slide to the next components to be able to highlight a little bit about what you can expect to see when looking into career opportunities in communications, and it also might help better align your ideas of where you might want to end up. So as you can imagine, in communications, what I like to say is we know a little bit about a lot because we have a lot more in-depth knowledge of how different platforms work in order to be able to advise our senior management. So advising senior leadership and departments on strategic communications approaches is fundamentally what we do. And it is a big priority on our desk. So we have to have a firm understanding of the environment, the platforms, the impacts, and what our overall objectives are. In order to support that, we also have to develop and implement communications plans, whether or not our objective is to communicate to internal employees and staff, or whether to communicate to Canadians, or in my sense, at Global Affairs Canada, communicate abroad, communicate to people that live overseas but are still Canadian, or to advocate on what we're doing around the world. Another component that you could see in communications and what your day-to-day could look like would be communicating and managing content across all platforms. Working at the G7, as you can imagine, we had a lot of visual components, video components, and then we had to be able to ensure that those could be utilized across all platforms to reach our objectives, to communicate our G7 goals. So that is also a really interesting career path because you need to have a lot of that granular understanding of the platforms, their intent and their purposes. Here we're going to go a little bit more into media monitoring, which is a really interesting way to kind of evaluate the public environment and public sentiment. It is really important, obviously, for communications advisors to be aware of what's going on in their surroundings and how it could impact their plans and strategies. And it would also directly impact your recommendations when you're advising your senior leadership and management. Obviously, complying with communications policies and standards is fundamental for everyday work. I think no matter where you end up in the communication streams, this one is kind of one of those pivotal learning blocks that if you don't know the policies and standards yet, definitely something to dive into and dig your teeth into, because it will impact and influence every aspect of your work in your day-to-day life working in communications. And then at the end, collaborating. I think the best part about working in communications on the day to day is that we touch a lot of different fields, whether you're dealing with creative services or you're dealing with media relations, kind of the internal communication streams, or you're dealing with your policy clients, program clients, or even as far as like the minister's office and the Privy Council's office. We touch and connect a lot of different components in order to best do our work. And I think it's definitely seen as an asset, and it provides us with a very unique skill set that you use day to day in communications, no matter what stream you end up in. All right, so that's it for me for now, and over to you.
I believe I'm next. So, hi everyone. As Caitlin mentioned, my name is Aditi Kasoon, and I'm currently a communications advisor at the Privy Council office. I mainly work in the corporate and clerks communications team. So, my role is very multifaceted, I would say. I work in internal communications, social media writing, support the clerk and deputy clerk's mandates. So yeah, and I previously have been working in the federal government since 2018. I initially started as an information management advisor at Transport Canada, and then swiftly left the public service to pursue my master's degree in the UK in communications and media studies. And eventually, after COVID hit, I made my way back to Canada and decided to try working in communications in different sectors, so mainly nonprofits and the private sector. And eventually I found my way back to the public service. I started working as a communications officer, mainly in social media, in international development at Global Affairs, and then, started as a casual and sort of kind of worked my way up to an indeterminate. And I briefly worked in policy as well. I wanted to get that writing experience and learn a bit about the machinery of government. So I worked on the Center Block Rehabilitation Project at Public Services and Procurement Canada, and then found my way to the Privy Council office, where I sort of get to flex all of these writing experience and skills working in internal comms, and like I mentioned, it's multifaceted. So I also, as I mentioned, hold a master's degree from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. I do have a bit of researching experience, event planning experience, and focusing on misinformation in communications. And outside of work, I still sort of dabble in communications with my volunteer projects, working for EndoAct and Endometriosis Network of Canada. This sort of leads me to my next slide, please, about exploring career paths in the government. So there are so many fields and subfields within communications in the government. We have stratcoms, we have media relations, web and social media, internal comms, marketing, advertising, visual comms, even POR, speech writing, event planning. So I have been lucky that in my current role, I have been able to sort of touch upon all these little subfields, from stratcoms, social media writing, even a little bit of event planning. And one thing I think I would also include alongside public opinion research is research in general. So this is, I would say, an up and coming topic within the government is communications writing and research. So for example, at PCO, I know we have the Impact and Innovation Unit, and they focus solely on misinformation and disinformation in the government. And this sort of helps feed into the communications policies within the government, and then it trickles down to senior advisors and officers within the government that sort of feed into how we communicate to Canadians. And I would say, for all of these subfields, you do need to have strong language skills. You do need to have good writing skills as well. But from my position, from how I sort of found myself to my current role is I got to try a little bit of everything. And I really also stress upon finding that experience elsewhere within the government. So if you are in policy and you want to get into comms, the avenue is 100% there. You just sort of need to fine tune your skill set a little bit. Which leads me to, where are the jobs in communications in the government? So the good news is every government department has a comp shop. So you can 100% find yourself something. Just find your niche, whether it's social media writing, whether it's strategic communications, where you get to write communications plans and sort of lead on your own campaigns. It's across the government. It's, you know, anywhere you would go, there is a need for communicators to communicate about the mandates and the initiatives about the government to Canadians. So one thing I would say is network, and find yourself your niche, and you'll be able to sort of explore all these different careers in communications. I've been in the government for 5 years, and every role has been different for me. And with that, I think I will pass it on to Ananya. I think she's online.
Hello, everybody. I'm up next. I am Lucy Ellis. I am a senior speechwriter at the Privy Council Office. Much like my fellow panelists, I have done a variety of jobs in communications, and I truly love it because I am a writer. I grew up, I was that kid, 7 years old, sort of writing little short stories. And for me, I found communications and thought, oh my goodness, this is a job where I can get paid money to write things and also have fantastic experiences and opportunities. I have been to Nunavut in the Arctic for work as a social media manager of a military exercise. I've spoken at conferences abroad. I have met so many fascinating people. I've had the opportunity to dive into so many different files. I know more about Prince Edward Island's potato production than I ever wanted to know. But it is such an exciting area of work. The people are great. All of these opportunities are fantastic. So really, I do encourage you to sort of find that niche, find that passion. Like Caro and Aditi mentioned, there are so many sort of subfields of communication where you can really dig in and find a niche and find something that you love and you care about. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about some of the core skills that you're going to need to build as you're looking at your career in communications. If you're going to be good at comms, you have to be able to write well. You have to be able to express yourself. You have to be able to work with people. Like Caro said, you're going to be collaborating with so many different teams across different departments inside your own department. So building those strong relationships with people, having people be able to rely on you and be able to rely on them, it is absolutely integral to communication. You also need to be able to critically think about a situation, analyze all of the different information that you're getting from different places. Like Aditi said, there's a ton of research involved. You're going to be sort of reading different reports. You're looking at environmental scans. You're looking at media analysis. You're looking at all of this different information. And you're thinking back to, what is your department's mandate? Like, what are you trying to communicate? What are your objectives? And how does your work fit into this bigger picture? So training yourself on how to look at the big picture is really fundamental for a comms career. And then finally, being able to adapt, be able to sort of have multiple things on the go and manage your time effectively, be able to prioritize, be able to sort of set your work up so that you can succeed. Because I tell you, there have been days where I'm given, 59 minutes to turn a speech around, and I have to be able to say, like, okay, let's go, like, I can get this done. And then there will be other times where I have, 3 months to work on a speech. So every day can be totally different. There's different sort of pieces of knowledge that are really important for finding a career in communications. You'll typically see these on a job poster, or they'll be part of the statement of merit criteria. So take a look at those, look at what's needed, and prepare yourself going into an interview or any kind of job process. And so, where do you learn? Where do you develop your skills? The Communications Community Office has an excellent newsletter. It always has different themes, different sub areas that they focus on. They'll have courses and different resources. There's a ton of communities of practice. So, I'm part of the speech writing community of practice. It is near and dear to my heart. There is a community of practice for basically everything. So, find your people, find your niche. And then there's so much free online learning. So read articles, look at videos, look at case studies, and sort of take your learning into your hands and see what you can find. And finally, as just yesterday, the Department of National Defense put out a job poster that they have a communications inventory that they've opened. So I encourage everyone to go and take a look on that on the jobs website because they are doing a big hiring spree. So national defense, it's where a couple of us started our careers. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And with that, I will pass it over to Ananya. Thank you.
Hey, I don't know if you can see me right now.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, cool. I can't see myself, so sorry. I'm joining from my phone. I had a few technical difficulties, but yeah. Anyways, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so honored to be here today. My name is Ananya, and I work in communications at Finance Canada. And today I'd like to share a bit of my journey into this field and how I transitioned from studying science to building a career in the government communications field and what kind of qualifications and competencies that you might need to follow a similar path. So, if you'd asked me a few years ago what I thought I'd be doing today, I probably would have said med school or medicine or, research, some kind of job like that. I completed a degree in cognitive science, which blends psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, and computer science. So, for much of my academic life, I imagined a future in research or healthcare. So, something very structured and scientific. But as I progressed in my studies, I started to feel some sort of disconnect. I loved learning and I was fascinated by how the mind works, but I wasn't passionate about the idea of working in a lab or applying to medical school. What I found myself drawn to more than anything was explaining what I was learning, simplifying theories and studies and like sharing them with friends, classmates, colleagues, family members, you know it. Whether it was through presentations, writing, or just casual conversations, I really enjoyed making challenging scientific content more accessible and just engaging overall. And that's when I had a bit of a light bulb moment. So, no matter how important your work is, if you can't communicate it clearly, it's very hard to make an impact. And that realization led me to explore communications. At first, I wasn't very sure if I could fit into a field I hadn't formally studied. But as I began learning more, I discovered that communications is so much more than writing press releases or posting on social media. It's about strategic storytelling, it's about helping people understand the policies and programs that affect their lives. And it's about doing that work in the service of the public. And that's what pulled me in, and I haven't looked back since. Today, I'm a multimedia officer at Finance Canada, where I support strategic communications and developing social media content. I help draft key messages, advise on social media content, and work very closely with teams across the department to ensure that we're communicating very clearly and effectively. And what I love most is that every day is very different. The work is very meaningful, fast paced, and deeply collaborative. And I've genuinely been enjoying my time here. Okay, so that's enough about me. Now let's talk about how you can get into a career like this and what you need to succeed. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Most communication positions in the Government of Canada fall under the Information Services, so IS classification. The minimum education requirement is a degree from a post-secondary institution. Honestly, that's it. Like, no specific major is required. Many of us come from journalism, communications, or political science backgrounds, but others, like myself, come from fields like science, health, or technology. Sorry. So don't count yourself out just because your degree isn't traditional. What's more important is how you apply it and apply what you've learned and how you build on it with practical experience. That brings me to key competencies or the core skills that really help you succeed in this field. Sorry, I don't know why I'm coughing so much. I'll quickly build off what Lucy said earlier. So yeah, she talked about strong writing and storytelling skills, very self-explanatory. Strategic thinking, this is very important. Communications is more than just about sharing information. It's about sharing the right information at the right time in the right way. It's like asking questions, what's our objective? Who needs to hear this message? What tone and format will be most effective, et cetera, et cetera. Collaboration is key. Adaptability, composure under pressure, priorities shift very quickly in the government. Staying calm, focused, and flexible helps you manage these moments effectively. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. And lastly, initiative and sound judgment. You need to know when to flag an issue, when to ask questions, and when to confidently move forward. Good judgment and proactive thinking go a very long way in building credibility and trust with your team. Sorry. These competencies aren't just checkboxes. They're things you develop and strengthen over time through every project, every conversation, and every challenge. Yeah, so I'll end with this. Communications may not have been where I thought I'd land and where I started my degree for sure, but it's where I found my passion and purpose. Yeah, that's all I got for you for now, and thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. So with that background in mind, we're now going to move into the question and answer period. So just a reminder that please put your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And remember to vote for the questions you like most, because we will prioritize those in the session. Okay. So the first question we have for our panelists is, do you use ChatGPT to write your stuff, speeches, digital content, etc.?
Caitlin, I might take a stab at that one. So I'm a certified AI hater on my team. I recognize like there are a lot of valuable use cases for generative AI in making the public service more efficient, for delivering excellence in services to Canadians. Like there are a lot of really valuable use cases for it. My concern with generative AI in comms is one, the reason why I'm in comms is because I love doing comms work. So why would I sort of outsource that? And I think that there's still a lot of bugs to be fixed with regards to AI hallucinations. I have concerns about the climate emission aspect of generative AI, and the sort of ownership and accountability. So that's sort of me. I will say for folks who are using generative AI in communications work, please do read the TBS guidelines on the use of generative AI. In the guidelines from Treasury Board, we do have a responsibility to maintain public trust and accountability to publicly disclose the significant use of generative AI in our communications products. So if you have a valid reason that you think using generative AI could make your work better, could enhance your abilities, could make your service delivery like more excellent, then just make sure that you're communicating that to your manager, that they're on board with it, and that you have a plan for how you will be publicly disclosing in some way the use of AI in that product. because I think that there's a big reputational risk to the government of Canada if we aren't disclosing it and then we are found out. So if you're going to do it, just like be transparent, be responsible, double check any facts or figures, double check your quotes, like do all of the work to make sure that the output is something that you can 100% stand behind and use it in ways that like enhances the skills that you already have.
That was an excellent answer, Lucy. Thank you. Okay, on to our next question. From a communications and networking perspective, how relevant is LinkedIn in pursuing a career in communications in the Government of Canada?
I can take this one. In terms of networking, LinkedIn is great. It helps you sort of identify key people in specific departments. Given that I currently, alongside another advisor, we manage the Government of Canada LinkedIn page. Very oftentimes we need to find specific contacts to like approve content or collaborate on things or consult on something. And LinkedIn is kind of, I use it alongside GEDS because sometimes, I hate to admit, GEDS can be a little slow with updating information. So it's, it's a best way to find someone. And 100%, I think it's good to connect virtually with someone. But from my experience, I think networking also has that face-to-face value. I think if you want to learn from someone, or at least try to be remembered by, like a director or a manager, and you want to eventually work in this specific field or work in their specific department, I always encourage people to go out for coffee chats, and put yourself out there, get out of your comfort zone. I'm a certified introvert. I don't like just, showing up and doing small talk in front of people, but I have had to put myself out there and introduce myself at events, and eventually you sort of get over that fear. But definitely, connect with someone on LinkedIn, but also send them a message to be like, hey, I want to learn about your work, or I'm curious about any openings on your team. Don't be afraid to do that. Most of the time, I have found that managers are actually super receptive to that. And if you take them out for coffee, bonus, they're going to think, this person is super out there and they love to chat. So yeah, that's my advice.
Great advice. Thank you, Dee. I'll also just add that I've sometimes used LinkedIn if there's someone that's in a position that I'm like aspiring to or interested in, to just see, what career path they've taken, maybe what training they've done or what background they have. So it can be useful for that as well. Okay, great. The next question we have, are there any trends or priorities that aspiring comms professionals should be aware of and or consider in the government right now? Any certifications you found the most helpful in your roles?
So I can jump in a little bit about this one. So coming from global affairs originally, as you can imagine, there's lots of misinformation, disinformation happening, as well as AI generated content, so on and so forth. So what we're seeing, and as an emerging trend, when we look at a lot of federal departments, is we're seeing that emerging context of having these teams that will really address misinformation, disinformation. As you can imagine, with the current international environment that we're functioning in, I think it's now identifying itself as more of a communications component, and more people are starting to look to specialize in communicating in order to combat misinformation and disinformation. So that is definitely a trend that I've seen at GAC, and now it's starting to spread. I've heard components of different federal departments also pursuing those same kind of targeted teams, which is really interesting. And as for any certifications I found the most helpful, I went back to university during the pandemic to do my master's in communications because I originally had a bachelor's in journalism. And I found returning back to the education world after being in the public service, after being an employee and working in the field, was greatly beneficial. So if it's something that you're looking at doing and it's a hesitation that you might have based on your age or where you're at in your life, there's always options. There's flexible post-secondary schools. I did mine through Mount St. Vincent University, and I had a child at the same time at home with me. And really, at the end of the day, it was something to keep in mind that you can always go back to school. You can always do it in your evenings and weekends. And as much as it seems cumbersome at the time, you will recognize how much time you have and the joys of learning again, which I found was an asset and has now equipped me with some skills coming back into my field and coming back from maternity leave that have greatly benefited me and benefited my time at the G7 and at Global Affairs.
Thank you, Carol. Does anyone else have any experience they like to add? Oh, Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Caitlin. I just wanted to say, so I think the most valuable training that I have taken in my now 11 years was a 2-day course on Excel. And like that's such a wild thing for a communications professional to say. But using it for like social media analytics, deep diving through the public service employee survey, if there's any kind of like data analysis that instead of having to be dependent and like going to your policy person, being able to just understand and interpret like StatsCan data for when you're doing environmental scans, like a simple 2-day Excel course, like actually opened up so many avenues that just empowered me to be able to analyze things more on my own and like not have to outsource that. So there's also a lot of kind of like lateral skills that are good for development.
Great. Thank you both. Okay, the next question. Are there roles in communications that stem more into public affairs or public relations? I've only seen it through D&D, but curious if these types of positions are just rare or different in other departments.
I can touch on this one a little bit. So I can confirm that they do exist in other departments. However, they may look different. Um, every department kind of has their own system and their own process. So when it comes to public affairs or media relations, sometimes you're a team that's working with the policy analyst to draft the responses yourself. Sometimes you're a conduit between the strategic communication shop and between the policy clients in order to respond to media queries. However, it doesn't exist across all of government because we do receive those media requests and we have to be ready to answer. And so while it does exist in one form, such as the spokesperson team at DND, which I'm well acquainted with, it could definitely look different across a myriad of departments and agencies.
When I was at the Department of Agriculture, so I was on the communications team for the Market and Industry Services branch. And there were regional engagement teams that were sort of part of the policy team, but we worked really closely together when there was like a potato crisis. And I ended up writing a lot of stakeholder letters for the minister to send to different stakeholder groups out in PEI, and worked really closely with the people who were in the regional team to sort of get a sense of what was happening on the ground to tailor our communications. So there definitely is a lot of interplay between like stakeholder engagement and that kind of work as well.
Great. Thank you both. Okay, this is a question about regional opportunities. So what type of federal employment opportunities are available for those outside of the NCR? For those who are in the regions and not near a major local center, are there virtual employment aspects? Or if we are really serious about staying with the federal government, especially in the workforce adjustment situation upon us, is being in the NCR a benefit?
I mean, Caitlin, not to put you on the spot, but I feel like you are kind of the perfect.
I was going to say, I have
spot.
something to add here. So my role that I'm currently in is an NCR position that I work from remotely out of Vancouver, but all of my other roles have been regional prior to that. I would say that there are communications opportunities in the regions. I'm specifically talking, my experience has been in Victoria, BC and Vancouver, BC. And so obviously there are like differences depending on where you're located and the amount of opportunities there will be. But almost like or most departments have regional comms teams. So I think a big piece of it is getting connected, doing networking, finding out which offices there are in your region, getting in contact with those people, and kind of seeing how you might be able to, to have an opportunity there. Um, it is, though I will acknowledge that it is a challenge. There's definitely more communications positions in the NCR than there are in the regions. And so it might take a little bit longer. Your career progression could be a little bit slower. Things like if you speak French or not are also a consideration, and getting access to training. So it's definitely not a deal breaker in any way. You can have a really interesting, great career in the regions. But it does potentially take a little bit more effort just to figure out where those opportunities are, and how to access them, and getting kind of just that information to get you in a better place to succeed. Um, yeah, and there are although they are um, limited, there are still options to work from regional offices for NCR positions for some departments as well, which is what I'm doing. Um, so yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that you have to move at all to have a good career in communications.
I just want to add on to that. I think, like Caitlin, you made a lot of great points when it comes to like regional considerations when working in communications, like in terms of career progression and that kind of stuff. I will say I highly recommend even to, you know, some friends of mine who have been looking for career changes within the government is stay connected to those informal government jobs groups. I know they're like across social media now. It's like on Facebook, on LinkedIn, etc., even Reddit, I think. Um, I say that because I recently saw this very cool job with the Canadian Space Agency where you get to do event planning. And the work itself was more like you get to work with NASA to like set up these events for the Canadian astronauts who are going to the mission to the moon. So they do exist, but you know, keep an eye out.
Very cool. Speaking of cool jobs we'd like to do for a day, that would be high on my list. Okay, the next question, how do we find the communications inventory? I'm not sure exactly. Um, Maybe just like where communications jobs would be posted?
In term like if it's like a formal inventory, I always say Government of Canada jobs. Like if you have a profile on from that web page, you can actually set up these alerts that let you know like what job has been posted. Even sometimes you get like notice of appointments and that kind of stuff, but you can actually sort of filter what type of roles you're looking for, like the classification, the level, and that kind of stuff. Another one that I, you know, just mentioned is like the informal Government of Canada jobs groups that are across social media. Those are like my go-tos, but you know, I'll leave it to my colleagues to let me know if there's any other ones.
Great. Okay. I think we've covered most of them there. I know I can echo what Aditi just said. I found some job opportunities before through the informal Facebook pages, just that positions were being posted and then could apply through those links. So it's definitely a good resource. Um, all right. The next question we have is how do you network in a virtual environment?
So I can talk a little bit about this one. One with relation to my job at Global Affairs, as well as at the G7. So as you can imagine, working at Global Affairs, chances are you're probably going to work a lot with some of our missions abroad. And as you can assume, time differences, challenges, connectivity, those are all different hurdles that we face And especially if they're your client or you're trying to network and keep in touch with them, it is a big hurdle to have. And I recognize that operating in and trying to network within a virtual field can be quite difficult. What I started doing is I started having monthly check-ins with my clients. And then from there, I bridge those relationships in order to keep networking and in order to keep in touch. In a rotational environment, such as global affairs, a lot of times maintaining those relationships is pivotal and networking with them because they will eventually show back up as a client in another branch. So it one helps you keep the pulse on what your clients need, and it also gives you that opportunity to build that relationship, to form the connection in order to keep networking with those individuals. So I really like to keep it unless I'm really spearheading for a specific reason based on a specific topic I'm interested in, or I'd like to learn more about opportunities, to focus on that relationship first, showcasing my abilities, my skill set, to ensure that they also see myself as a vital component of maybe someone worth continuing to network with. So that's definitely from that perspective. Also virtually, when we're talking about in regions, time differences, things like that, being accommodating, if you are booking those coffee chats, to maybe take a timing that's at a disadvantage for yourself. Like I've had 6 a.m. meetings. I've also had 6 p.m. meetings. When you're working with the branch in Asia, sometimes you just have to kind of pick and choose. And, in the long run, if that's your goal and your objective, then it's worth that minor sacrifice for your early morning sleep in. And then outside of that, networking with new employees and working at the G7, as you can imagine, we had people hired in region for the G7, and then we would relocate prior for the big event. That was also really cumbersome with the 2-hour time difference, and trying to get to know your colleagues that you're going to essentially be hanging out with for the 35 days that you're relocated, and working long hours and stressful hours with them in order to deliver the summit. So I really focused on having coffee chats with those individuals that I did not know personally, that I did not have the opportunity to meet prior to relocating, to at least build a certain level of rapport with them, to understand where they're coming from, what their experiences are, and network in that sense to make sure that we had a successful summit and we're able to deliver on communications objectives. So under the guise of working up to build our relationship during relocation, I was also able to network for my own personal advancement in order to make those connections in regions and in different parts of Canada that I never thought I would be working in.
I just want to shout out, yes, everything that Kara just said, because it's networking shouldn't be a sort of a transactional approach. It's about building relationships with people. It's, when you ask someone how they're doing, like actually asking it and actually meaning it. It's having all of those relationships and continuing to sort of grow them and nurture them so that, if either an opportunity or a crisis happens, you already have a really strong groundwork with people, and you're not sort of going into it and starting from ground zero. So yeah, it is all about relationships and putting the effort in, and thinking about their needs and not just sort of what you're trying to get out of the situation.
Really great advice. Yeah, and I feel like in a virtual setting, it doesn't always come as naturally. You have to put the time in, book those times, make the effort a little bit more than you do in person, but it's just as important. So thank you both for that insight. The next question, for the panelists who work at PCO, I'm curious to hear about the path that led you there and how the central agency experience compares to working at other departments.
I can go first. Let's see.
Okay.
So how I ended up at PCO is I actually applied to a lot of competitions, and did not have a lot of success at the beginning. I will say, that's one of my challenges of working in the government is putting in the time and effort to really kind of fine tune your answers for competitions. And at the time I was in EC3 and I wanted to go back into communication. So, day in, day out, I was putting in the work to qualify for an IS4 competition. And eventually, that did happen. I got into 2 pools. And then by that point, I was sort of kind of cruising what my next role was going to look like. And from there, I posted in the informal groups, and I was looking for the next portfolio for me that I think would have worked well with my interests and what I want to do with my career. And I would say I did get lucky in the sense that somebody from PCO responded. And then you go through the formal process as usual. You go through the interviews, and I already had my second language test results, so I didn't have to go through that. But if you don't have, your language level results, like that's another consideration to have, especially if you're jumping from one role to another. I don't really know what it's like with other classifications, like if you need to have like a certain SLE results, because I know in comms it's mainly CBC, CCC, or CBE. And for that, just those things to keep in mind when you are considering switching. And yeah, and I've been at PCO for 2 years. I'm loving it. I've seen and done a lot of interesting and cool things. I will share this small anecdote that I had to wear the Winterlude mascot outfit for a video with the clerk. And I didn't realize, working at PCO, like I was sort of warned by my policy colleagues that like, oh, you're never going to stop working. Like it's crazy hours, like people are mean and they all wear suits. And well, here I was in an Ice Hog mascot. So, highlight of my career thus far. And when it comes to my central agency experience versus outside the government, outside this specific department, it's hard to compare. I would say that I wouldn't say that our job is that demanding, but you do need to have the ability to pivot, especially in this day and age of transition. And we've had an election, we've had a new prime minister, we've had a new clerk. You just need to have the ability to be able to be flexible. And also, the one advice I would also give is don't marry yourself to your job. Self-care is important. I have also learned that, you can put in 2 to 3 months of your work into one specific strategy or a specific product, and it could change like that overnight. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I'll let Lucy go next.
Thanks, Aditi. Yeah, I'll keep it short. So I also came via the informal networking group. So through the speechwriting community of practice, the team here was looking for a new speechwriter. I was at Natural Resources at the time, copying and pasting for a minister who wanted the same speech at every event, which I did not find particularly fulfilling. So I jumped at the opportunity to take on a new speechwriting role. And for me, as a speechwriter, the thing that's really fun about being in a central agency is that writing for the clerk, he talks about everything. So I've written speeches about fentanyl. I've written speeches about data and digital and artificial intelligence and the First Nations Major Projects Coalition and reconciliation and mental health and pride and like literally everything that the government of Canada does. So many economic speeches. I kind of wanted to die every time I had to write about productivity. But it's everything across the entire government. It's such a broad scope, which is really cool, especially in contrast to a line department like agriculture, where like I was potato girl, and African swine fever girl, and I got really specialized knowledge in those 2 things. So it's fun having both. And on my kind of public service bingo card, like I want to have every possible kind of public service experience because there's so much to explore and so much to offer.
Thank you both for those insights. That was really helpful. And of all the vegetables, I would say the potato is probably one of the best. Okay. We have time for one more question here. We're just about at the end. What strategies do you use to manage misinformation or public panic during a crisis?
So I feel like I'm the one that introduced this into the public sphere of this talk, so I can touch on it a little bit. I am by no means a leader at the forefront of combating disinformation or misinformation. I really leave that to the amazing team at Global Affairs that does really good work on it. If you're looking for some examples, feel free to look on the foreign policy social media accounts. They have some really great campaigns going on doing just that. However, I will highlight the fact that there is a countering disinformation guidebook for public servants that is available on canada.ca that I can share the link in the chat. And I think, at least from my perspective and what I've seen applied, it's being as transparent as possible and to not combat it directly. Once you are trying to combat a narrative directly, you are essentially lending validity to it. And so recognizing that it's really more so concentrating on your own communications plan, your own objectives and key messages in order to introduce what is the truthful aspect of the narrative. So you'll notice a lot of the countering disinformation components that you'll see on the foreign policy is talking about the facts and highlighting the facts and just being as transparent as possible to combat it in a more understated way instead of lending itself to validate other claims being made from whether foreign interference actors or more so anyone seeking to vilify a certain political component. So that's kind of what I would recommend if anyone else wants to build off of that. I know it's very niche.
Yeah, and I think this is something we're going to see more and more on in the coming years. This is an area of lots of focus for sure in the communications field. Aditi, did you want to jump in?
Add just a little bit more. And like Caro mentioned, I am not an expert in mis and disinformation. This is just, knowledge that I've sort of acquired working in comms and studying comms as well. One thing that I have thoroughly enjoyed in my roles throughout the government working in communications is that, especially for social media, we try to employ I don't want to say fun, but a more simplistic approach to communications. And that's one thing I thoroughly enjoy about the Canadian government is when we communicate about policies, we try to make the information as accessible as possible. And that's another, like passion of mine when it comes to accessible communications. I think it's incredibly valuable to how we dispel disinformation and misinformation. A lot of the stuff that you'll see online, all these echo chambers of people just spreading lies and, they're quite literally spinning information to their benefit. Our role as communicators is important here. And I think this is also why I thoroughly enjoy my job is that we communicate to Canadians. It's our responsibility to make sure that what we're saying is true, is transparent, and we have to remain accountable for what we put out there. And that full circle comes back to the use of AI as well. We have to be transparent about using AI. And we are trying to adapt our communications techniques, but I also think it's valuable if you do want to jump into this field is to have this sense of responsibility when you are communicating. Make it as accessible as possible, make it as simple as you can, especially when it comes to policy issues. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. So I'll let Lucy go ahead if she has anything to add.
No, I recognize that we're sort of a little bit over our time, so 100% agree with everything that Aditi and Caro said. And I really like what Aditi was saying at the end there about that sort of values approach to our work, like really like finding meaning and purpose in the sort of values that we serve and like that role of being accountable, being transparent, being open, being accessible, and how we are serving the public through our work.
Great, thank you, Lucy. And yes, noting the time, I realize we're just a couple minutes over now. We did start slightly late, but I just want to give Ananya a chance to chime in as well, if she wanted to add anything. Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, again. Thank you.
Okay. No, yeah, I don't have anything to add, but yeah, I guess like my final words, I guess, would just be to say I love communications. It's a field that combines creativity, empathy, strategy, and just like, the public service. And if you're someone who enjoys making information meaningful and you want to help people understand what's going on around them and why it matters, and I think there's like definitely a place for you here. Yeah, you don't have to have all the answers right now, but just stay curious and follow your interests, and don't be afraid to take an unexpected path, like I did from science to communications, because sometimes that's where you discover the work you're meant to do. Yeah, and that's all I got.
A perfect way to end the session. So, thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your thoughts and advice. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today as well. If you enjoyed today's session, make sure to check out the other career showcase sessions that are happening Tuesdays all the way through till the end of August. And if you're looking for in-person networking opportunities, like we mentioned, are so important, the Federal Youth Network is also hosting learning days and future leaders forums across the country. So you can find information about those on their wiki page. It's, as always, it's free, and it's a great opportunity to do some in-person networking. So check those out. And before you sign off, we kindly ask that you just answer one more poll question just to give us some feedback on today's session that will help us moving forward. And that's everything we have. So thank you so much. Wishing you all the best of luck in your career journeys. Feel free to connect with the Federal Youth Network or any of today's speakers on LinkedIn. And we hope you have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone.